We'll get going there. Okay, everybody, welcome to Behind the Clipboard on the Wheels Off podcast. Today, I'm with one of the greats of the Simulation Football League, owner of the Arizona Scorpions. Almost said Arizona Cardinals because you know where I'm from.
Yeah.
And where you're from, but Arizona Scorpions, Mr. Eddie Gage. How you doing today, Eddie?
I'm doing good, man. Just decompressing right now and enjoying life.
All right. I totally understand that. So for those who aren't familiar with us, I am part of a couple simulations, the Simulation Football Association or simfba.com, and also Simulation Football League, which is simfl.net. He's one of the great owners here. And Eddie, so I guess in the game, kind of what's your goal there at Arizona? What is your whole overall goal playing this sim?
I have one goal, and that's to win an SFL championship.
Yeah, well, everybody's got that. I mean, is there like any bigger reason that what drew you into this?
What drew me into it, or a bigger reason?
What drew you into it? Then obviously when you got here, you changed because you went from being a player to becoming an owner, right?
Yes.
So there's some goals along the way that you're still shooting for. Obviously, the championship's like the crowning jewel, but there's something more behind you.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I consider myself a great leader. I've studied about leadership and read a few books on it, and I consider myself a pretty good one. But when I first joined this league, I feel like I told this story freaking 3-4 times, but I was a player just for a long time from season 3 through most of season 9. And I've never was at that time for those first 6 seasons, I wasn't really even invested in a league like that. I mean, I only joined because one of the co-owners of Baltimore, TJ, told me about the league and asked me to join. The first few times he asked me, I kept telling him no, because I just could not understand how anyone could get excited about a game that's simulated. I have little control over them. Like, nah, thanks, but no thanks. But he just kept asking, was just not taking no for an answer. So one day I said, you know what, I'll join. Screw it. So I joined. And back then it was free.
Yeah.
And so it was really no harm, no foul. But he would message me when the games were, and 98% of the time, I wouldn't even show up to even watch my own team. So I just could care less about it. And then I'm not sure what happened, but he just kept asking us to come in and join, because there was a few others along the way too. And I just got tired of him asking me. So I decided to watch a game one day, and it was pretty entertaining. I'm like, oh, okay. But at that time, I still wasn't invested yet. And I forget who we were playing back then, but it was somewhere in the middle of season 9, and I decided to watch a game, and I forget how many points we gave up, but it was a lot.
Right.
And I said, I sent TJ a message and said, man, I don't know who your defensive coordinator is, but you need to fire him because this is embarrassing. And he said, well, why don't you do it? And I said, not a problem. And I did it. And I'm not sure what happened, but just the fact that I had a little bit more control over the outcome, a switch went off, and all of a sudden I went from zero to no interest to suddenly I won't say all in at that point, but something sparked and triggered in my mind. I said, okay, this can be pretty fun if I can figure out a way to turn this defense around and make us more competitive. But, it took some time, but unfortunately at the end of that same season, Baltimore folded. Back then they were the Baltimore Crabs.
Okay.
And they folded for a season, and I had nowhere to go. I didn't even know the team folded until the off season, when people started DMing me saying, hey, Eddie, we need a new defensive coordinator. Why don't you join us? And I said, well, I'm already in this league with TJ. I'm fine. He goes, well, didn't you get the news? I said, what news? He says, Baltimore folded. And I said, wait, what? And, long story short, I, became the owner, defensive coordinator in Houston. And since then, my interest went through the roof, and I've been here ever since. But in terms of other than just winning, I would say the fact that when I first started, I think the locker room was maybe 11 people back then, or 12 members in the team, including
Right.
myself. And now we're at 30 plus, depending on how your team is, created. And I don't know. It's I the fact that you have paying customers and they choose to play for you when they could
Right.
be on 24 other teams, but they choose to play for me. I get joy out of the fact that people reach out and say, "Hey, do you got any spots available at my position?" I love that. I love to see the smile on my players' faces after wins, or the ups and downs of watching games with them, because we have a team VC, and we watch games together sometime, and to see the peaks and valleys that we go through, it's rewarding when the time you put in preparing for these games, because I also coach, pays off, and those wins start to come. So I think once I got into ownership, I'm kind of fast forwarding past some stuff you're probably going to ask me, but once I got into ownership, and while also still coaching, when we first came out, I remember when Cam sent us our first schedule, season 14, and I said, "Man, bro," and I saw the schedule and we had some tough opponents, and I said, "This is going to be tough." And some of my teammates were saying the same thing, and I said, "Guys, I know it looks brutal now, but I got some growing pains to do, to go through as an owner and as a coach. But one day, and not one day far off, but one day soon, you're gonna look up, and just like we're saying, wow, we got to play this team. We got some heavy hitters on our schedule. One day, you're gonna look up, and those same teams are gonna say, wow, we got to play Arizona. We have to be on our A game." And so, just watching us grow and mature and improve, season after season, is refreshing for me.
Right. Yeah, it sounds kind of like similar to what I deal with over here in Pittsburgh as the GM. It's kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
So I definitely get that. So when it came, I mean, you took over Arizona. Used to be, you took over Arizona used to be a different team, correct? It was under Irvine, if I remember right.
OKC Renegades.
The Renegades, who are back now,
Yes.
with Irvine back. What kind of prompted you to make that choice to take over that team? I mean, obviously you were at Houston, you were doing well as a defensive coordinator. Everybody talks about you as like the prototype defensive back as well. What kind of really made you want to make that jump over?
I remember this as if it was yesterday. We were getting ready to play Vancouver, and at that time they were one of the top teams in the league. Andy was coaching them, and that season their offense was on fire. They were averaging like 30 some, I want to say like 35 points a game. They were just elite offense. And I remember one day in Gen Chat, they were talking about the game coming up, and someone said, "Wow, this is going to be a good matchup, Eddie against Eddie's defense against that elite offense in Vancouver."
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Eddie, how you feel about it?" And I said, "Well, we're going to find out, but I don't anticipate them putting up 35 points." I said, "In fact, they won't score 30. And we had a lot of trolls in Discord at that time, who liked to take stuff and, I guess, what you call bulletin board material, and run with it. And so they went and tagged Andy, who was the offensive coordinator at Houston, and says, Andy, what do you think about that?" And he said, "I guess we'll see." And sure enough, our defense balled out. We gave up some chunk yards here and there that kind of pissed me off, but our defense balled out. And at the end of the game, they were driving. They were out of timeouts, and they were in a hurry-up offense. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Everett Garrison, who was a rookie at that time, turned out he ended up winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, got a pick 6 to seal the game and put the game away.
Oh, wow.
And Cam was calling that game, and so was Jeremy, who was the owner of Denver. He used to broadcast games back then too. And I remember them saying, I remember Jeremy saying, "Wow, DeMar must be proud, of the way his Scorpions, of the way his Houston Hyenas playing today." And while it was a great moment, the first thing that came to my mind was, wait a minute, they were talking smack all week about how Eddie's defense is going to get challenged and
Mhm.
all this and all that, and nowhere in there am I mentioned. And while, don't get me wrong, I was proud for us as a whole and proud for DeMond for getting this win. I think it was our first win of the season. I think we were 0-2 at that time, or whatever the heck it was. And to not hear me when our defense played a pretty good game in the pick six, secured the win, that rubbed me the wrong way. And I said, "Whoa, man, what are we doing?" And so, and Jerry didn't mean any harm by that. He just mentioned that it is DeMond's team. He is the owner of the team. He was also coaching the offense, so he does deserve his respect. But at the same time, I felt like as if my efforts were being not recognized, and I
Right.
said, "No." And I remember telling DeMond, I think it was that next day, I said, "Man, DeMond, no disrespect, but it's time for me to get my own team because I want to be recognized more than I already am, and it's time for me to take that next step in my career in the SFL, and the time is now because I didn't like that moment of not being mentioned at all. So
Right.
there you have it.
Yeah, that would be a tough. I know, having coached on the sidelines in high school and junior high and stuff in real life. I understand that because it's the head coach's team. I was always a coordinator,
Mhm.
but it's just, I understand it. But on this level, because I know we're talking, it's real people talking fake sports. I mean, it still hurts.
Yeah,
It's like you do all this work. You took a high-powered offense, and you obviously put a governor on them, even though you lost, and you're still not recognized.
yeah,
I mean, so I guess that kind of goes back to your goals. You want that recognition, like, look what I built, because it is you.
hmm
So when you did this, what kind? I guess being new, I went around since season 22, 21. What's what was kind of like the impetus behind OKC leaving and you picking them up and basically taking them over and rebranding?
Well, first of all, no disrespect to Bovine. I always appreciate him giving me the opportunity to sell the team to me. But number one, I was not a fan of the location, of the
Right.
team name, and in my opinion, the jerseys were ugly, and I wanted nothing to do with it. And at I think back then I had been in Arizona for a couple years.
Hmm.
Um, I left Chicago a couple of years before that, so um, the goal was always going to be either Chicago or Arizona,
Okay.
and it was a tough choice. It really was because it's especially at that time, I felt more attached to Chicago than I did Arizona, even though I moved here. And I was thinking of all the additional sponsorship opportunities I would have in Chicago compared to here. And so it was a tough choice because I also envisioned playing in the snow, having the
Right.
snow games and 2K8 and all that. So it was a tough choice, but I ultimately decided to go to Arizona because again, it's where I live, and it would be easier if I end up having opportunities, and those opportunities were with people who lived here or their companies represented Arizona. So
Right.
I chose here, and I don't regret it at all.
Well, that's good. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned the name of one of your players getting the pick six,
Mm-hmm.
Evan Garrison. I know him too, but under a different name. He's in the other sim I'm in
Mm-hmm.
because he saw the podcast last time. And he goes, "Hey, you're in that too." I'm like, "Dude, I've literally been saying that in two different Discords for what, a
Uh-huh.
year and a half, 2 years now, and everybody's just now catching on to."
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
my
so I know
guy.
him as and under a different Discord name in a different Discord, but it's really cool. So when you come kind of look at this, when you're building Arizona and you're looking to build this winning team, what kind of things do you put into the evaluation process both as a coach and as an owner? Because to me, they're slightly different.
For me, my brand is important.
Mm-hmm.
So I take pride in it, and I remind my team all the time that when people think of Arizona, they think of a leading organization, not just a team that's a part of the SFL, but when people think of the SFL, one of the first teams they think of is us. And not just wins and losses, but how we interact with people around the league, both on and off the field. I want people to think of Arizona as a first-class organization. So I remember back in the day, he hasn't done this in several seasons, but Cam used to give out report cards at the end of every season. And part of that report card was ownership evaluations. We get a report card on our social media interaction, meeting minimum requirements, and teams who go above and beyond.
Right.
Teams who recruited well, teams who had a high retention rate, and I wanted to be mentioned in all of those categories. I wanted our players to have fun, to want to be here. But I also like to get everybody involved on the field. And so I tell my teammates matter of fact, we just had a team meeting last night and we introduced all the free agents and stuff. And I told everybody, if you want to be an MVP, especially like receivers and stuff like that, you on the wrong team, because I want everyone to be inclusive on our offense. I don't want just one person to shine week in and week out. No disrespect to the Gabriel Mannings and the Lauren Pacocos of the world and all that, but I want when people face us, they can't just say, wow, we got to stop that guy, or we have to key in on this guy. No, you got to worry about everybody, because first of all, I want our offense to be diverse, but also I want everyone who's paying, because it's not like Gabriel Manning is paying more than whoever tight end or wide receiver 2 is, or you know what I mean, or his tight end. Everyone pays the same amount. So I want everyone to feel included on this team. I want everyone to feel like they're a vital part of this organization, whether you're the quarterback, the running back, fullback, wide receiver 4. I want everyone to be involved, and I want everyone to be a part of my offense to feel as if they have a reason to watch, because you just never know when they might just go off, you know?
Right.
And so when people think of Arizona, I want them to think that Arizona is a great place to play, because when I say Arizona, I love y'all, man. I be for real. You know, I love every last one of my teammates, and that'll never change. And they're all important to me. Just, everyone from the quarterback down to the backup punter is important to me. And so when people think of Arizona, I want them to think of us as a first-class organization who cares about their players, who cares about, even when I had Rodney Smith, who just left here to go to Florida, he didn't have a player. He was just on a team to do stats. But I brought him up because I wanted him to feel what it's like to be in a pro locker room, but I wanted him to feel important too. And so that's my goal. I want people to think of us as a first-class organization. When you think of the SFL, you think of us too. And so that's always been my goal.
Do you think you've gotten to that point, or are you still working on it?
I think I've gotten to that point. It's been proven. We've won several awards for Owner of the Year. We've run GM of the season. We've run Franchise of the season. We've been to the championship game twice. We've done everything there is to do except win that chip. And so when the accolades came, that's when I knew that I've gotten to that point. But it's also important to not just be satisfied and just remain stagnant at that. You have to constantly work at it, because teams are constantly improving, whether it's on the field or finding ways to be involved in with social media, how to grow that platform and things of that nature. So it's important that you don't just say, okay, I've gotten here and just be happy. No, you can't be content. You have to find a way to continue to grow your brand. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Right. So you see a lot of it is specifically the brand of Arizona, and then the players and the performance on the field is what helps sustain that. Would that be fair?
I think the performance on the field, but I also think it's, like I say, our social, because if you just go and look through every team's social media, you'll see some post a lot more than others. I'm trying to find ways to be creative. In fact, just last night, because I've always had that mindset in which, for example, our social media, we don't go out, in the past, you haven't seen a presence like maybe the Johnny Pickler of old who will go out there and say, we about to beat y'all ass. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
We about to beat you guys up by 30 and mop the floor with y'all and then have a press conference before and after talking about how, what they just did to opponents and stuff like that. I never had that mindset. And then I think it was last season or the season before last when Fort Worth beat Atlanta in a heartbreaking loss for Atlanta. They were winning the entire game, and Fort Worth came back and won in like the waning moments of the game.
Right.
And Fort Worth social media posted, "That's got a sting." And considering they just played the Atlanta Swarm, and I think they had a can of Raid and stuff like that. And I said, man, that's kind of distasteful, man, because no one likes to lose. I mean, it's one thing. I don't know. It just rubbed me the wrong way. But then I kind of got to thinking about it as the season went on. I'm like, at the end of the day, it is just a game. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of told our social media people last night, you guys from now on, just have fun with it. I'm not saying go out there and do something that's flat out disrespectful, but just have more fun with it. And I don't know if you saw, we had a Twitter post come out last night, and we're playing Washington week 2, our first game. And the post was something to the effect of the fact that Diggs left us for Washington because he wants to be a co-owner. And they said, well, be careful, Diggs, what you wish for, because those losses hurt a lot more as an owner than it does as just a player. See you in week 2.
Right.
So that's not disrespectful. It's just, just kind of, I'm just trying to find a way to be more fun with it, so to speak. And so, yeah, that's where I'm headed.
Well,
just
like you said, this is just a game, but it's real enough that people are willing to pay for it and make decisions like you did, to be a D coordinator or owner or whatever, GM for me, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess when you do this, because you talked a lot about it, and I remember we talked about this, you were talking on your own podcast a little bit about this, how you felt. I mean, you felt a little bit, people just left. I understand people are going to move. I get that, but I mean, how do you kind of manage the roster after that much chaos this season? I mean, that's a growth thing for all of us.
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact if this is a game or not, it's still, you put a lot into, this is who you are. All right. So we talked about the chaos before the technical difficulties. Yeah. Kind of love technology for that. So basically the chaos of what happened, how do you manage the roster? Then how do you as the owner turn this into something positive?
Until Arizona has always had a high retention rate. I remember when Cam, I think it was 2 seasons ago, he reported the teams with the best retention. And Arizona ranked 2nd in the league behind Baltimore. And I was really proud of that. Mm-hmm. But this past season, I lose 5 people to one team. Well, it turns out, so long story short, Ira Began got an opportunity to be defensive coordinator in Washington. So he left. And so when he left, of course, his wife left because she's going to follow her husband. Right. No disrespect. But so did Charles Michael, who's also related to him. So did Hank Earl Troll, who's also related to him. So when I lost him, that's essentially 4 people I'm going to lose. And that's the that's the risk you take anytime you bring in a bunch of friends who all want to play together. Right. And so I lost those guys. And then Diggs went to be the co-owner in Washington. So that's 5 players. And then I lost 2 players who wanted to go back. They want to play one more season together with the team they started with before retiring. So they kind of want to take do a last hurrah with the team they played most of their career before they came here. So, it's tough. I've never lost that many people. And I don't know how, because there are teams who go through that every season, and I don't know how they do it because it's stressful. This was a stressful offseason for me trying to replace all that talent. And so to do so, it was tough because some of those guys, we didn't find out they were leaving until draft and to the free agency show. And I'm like, wait a minute, you told us you were coming back. And
Right.
so when that happened, that was, struggling, trying to find talent or comparable talent, but let alone someone we feel would be a good fit for our locker room. And one of them, those decisions turns out to be questionable amongst the league, who hit me up saying, Eddie, you don't normally bring in guys like that. What's going on? But the pickings were slim. And so we
Right.
had a long talk, and thank God he's good friends with someone on the team who's going to kind of be a mentor for him, a big brother, so to speak. And we'll just let the chips fall where they may. But I couldn't have asked for a better outcome of what we did get, because we were able to bring in Bernard Smith, who played here before. He left to go play with his best friend, and he's happy to be back here. Man, I love that guy. He is
Right.
on game day. Oh my God, he's like one of the team's biggest cheerleaders. So to have him back was really cool. And then we got Xavier Rowe, who has a pretty good build. Some stuff he does need to work on, but he's a great cover corner. And the Sims have been saying the same thing. So I'm glad to have him here. And then we lost Diggs, who was probably going to be in an All-Star game if we have one, but we replaced him with Adam Wiseman, who has a good bit of his own. But he has some stuff to work on too. But you aren't going to be perfect everywhere. There's going to be things you got to work on. So it's just one of the ebbs and flows, I guess, of going into a new season, and we just have to see where the chips fall. But yeah, dude, going through that and losing that many players, that's it's stressful. I've never had to go through replacing so many, and it was tough.
Yeah, I can understand. You mentioned a lot of teams kind of go through this every year, and then there are certain teams, like when I mentioned on the show, there's teams, there's franchises, and there's legacies. I see Arizona as a legacy.
I appreciate that.
Like Canton, those guys, because they're so Minnesota's up there too, and those guys, just because of the culture that's built.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of mentioned that some guys have some things to work on in their build. So when it comes to developing and looking for these players, are you looking for people that fit the locker room, or are you looking for people that have a build and then try to fit them into the locker room?
No. I look for people who, are going to be a good fit. And just like I tell our GMs every season, when we're looking at guys in the SFLM, I don't care if player A has a great build, but his personality is a question mark, versus a guy who has a great personality, but his build needs a ton of work. I'm going to take the guy with the personality 9.5 times out of 10, because you can always fix the build. You can't always fix the personality. Now, some guys you can get into your locker room. Like we have guys on our team now who, before they got here, had a different experience. I'm not going to elaborate, but they've had a different experience being on other teams. And they got here and they said, whoa, man, this was what it's like, man. This is night and day. And, the issues that they had in the past, I wouldn't call them issues, but the experiences they had in the past and some of their negative thoughts were changed, so to speak. And it came from being here. But yeah, dude, I'm going to take that someone with the good vibes 9.5 times out of 10, unless I'm desperate and I need that one piece to make a playoff run, and we sit down and tell them, hey, kind of like we did with Buchanan Simons. We lost Hank Earl Troll, didn't find out he was leaving until the day of the free agency show, and there was, when you talk about for days, we scoured the entire internet looking for people, both past and present, but they had already committed, of course, because it's the free agency show, so they were already committed somewhere else, and we calling people who are retired, and they either didn't respond or said they stand retired. He was literally the first person we talked to who said, hey, I'm on board. Great. And so I even talked to a friend of his who happens to, and I didn't even know they were friends. I won't say I'll leave his name out of it, but they're friends in real life. And he told me, Eddie, you already know what he comes with. And I know him because I know him from back in the day when he was on Chicago, back when I was in Houston. And so I knew what I was getting into, but, we kind of had a quick talk and said, hey, man, this is what I know, and this is what I expect, and blah, 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 blah. We supposed to have a deeper conversation later down the line. But his friend, who I just referred to earlier, said, Eddie, I'll be his big brother, I'll be his mentor, and we're going to get this thing right one way or another. So
Okay.
it's a gamble. It's a gamble, of course, but I didn't. The reason I didn't go into the draft looking for a receiver is because at the end of the day, Arizona is at the point where if we not contending for a championship season in, season out, it's a disappointment.
Right.
And so if I was a up and coming team in which the expectations aren't necessarily there to compete, then I would have just went into the draft. But now that we've gotten to a certain point where people expect us to make the playoffs and expect us to make a run, I didn't necessarily want to draft a guy who I knew, for lack of a better term, would be a liability more than someone I could depend on, so to speak.
Right.
And so, for the sake of the other 30-something people on the team, I went into free agency rather than drafting the guy. But at the same time, we sat down and had that talk about what we expect out of him. So it's just, it's a gamble I'm not known for taking, but I'm also at that point, like I said, in which I don't want to let those other guys in the locker room down. So if it doesn't work out, we can always get rid of them. But based off the preliminary talks we've had, I don't anticipate that happening. But you never know until the season develops.
Yeah, it is a long season. It's 15 weeks, so it does take a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of talking about that, because like with us, we're kind of the same way. We look for the fit in the locker room, and then we'll build the avatar, as I call it. Because the person's the player, the avatar is on the screen, and I much rather have a good fit. So when you kind of approach this, do you have like an underlying philosophy that kind of drives what you do as the owner of Arizona and as the coach? Is there Saban had a philosophy, Kirby Smart, Harbaugh, Schimbeck. You start naming great coaches, Bill Walsh, because there's a personality, there's a philosophy that kind of dictates. Is that the same way at Arizona? Is there something kind of just drives what you're looking for?
That's a great question.
You're welcome.
In terms of team building, one thing I look at, kind of like what I just said, and it's kind of changing, so to speak. And I'll get into that into a second too. But in the 2K8 days, I've never gone out and sought talent in which there would be, a couple of superstars, and then everyone else was kind of like their role players. Right. I've always wanted an evenly balanced team across the board, because I didn't want one person who I could rely on more than the others, so to speak.
Right.
And I've always had that mentality. And then one day a person who's not on the team anymore came to me and says, Eddie, maybe it's time we change that philosophy, and we get, we have a couple of superstars who we know are going to produce week in and week out for the most part. And at the time, I didn't agree with him, because he made that comment, first of all, after a loss. When we won, I think it was 4 straight before the end, everything was great and no one had any complaints. But when we lose, I tend to hear from people who don't really speak much about what we need to do as a team to improve. You know what I mean? And so, but then as the season progressed, last season, I looked across the league at the teams who were, for lack of a better term, the better performing teams. And even though we were 7-0, I was looking across the league and I said, wow, one thing I noticed is that these other teams who are amongst the better teams in the league, they tend to spend money in key areas like skill position players, for example. They make sure they're paid. You look at a lot of these teams and they spend a lot of money on the secondary. They make sure that they're well fed, And I'm just giving you one example. And I said, well, maybe it's time we change up things. But in the 2K8 days, you can do that in one off season.
Right.
In 2K4, that's not an option. unless you get rid of people and bring in others. You know, it's not if you retain those same players, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But when we lost some talent, you know, because we lost those 5 players to Washington and the other 2 to Denver,
Right.
I said, well, you know, now's the perfect time as any. So I went and invested some money on the back end to start. I'm not sure. Well, you probably did notice you're the GM. We play you guys week 3, but
Yeah.
But I invested more on the back end because I felt that was something I needed to do to compete. I went and looked at other rosters and I said, wow, that's how you're doing it. Okay, they spend a lot of money in these particular areas. And so I said, maybe that's something I should do. And so I did. Now I'm not there yet because it's going to take time, but I want to make sure that my secondary was paid.
Right.
And I expect them to perform like that. So that's something I'm starting to have a change with, because I've always wanted everyone to be equal. I want, like I said, I want everyone to feel important, and
Right.
they all important. But I've noticed that there's certain positions in which you don't have to pay them as well to perform.
Right. So basically, the shift has been from a balanced approach to more, hey, we may have people, here's your role. And you see this in professional sports anyway. I mean, obviously, if you're in the real life Kansas City Chiefs, it's Mahomes, it's Kelsey, there are certain people, and then everybody else plays their specific role. I mean, look at the Super Bowl. The running back could have scored, but he goes down at the 1 because it's icing the game. That's understanding the significance of that. So is there kind of takeaway? Is through your time, has there been any players that you've either drafted, because this last year of the draft, you've either drafted or you brought in as a free agent that you gambled on and it worked out, or any that didn't work out?
In terms of drafting, we have yet to draft anyone that didn't work out. In terms of, I guess you're talking about in terms of personality.
Well, you have players come in and it just if you do your research, you do it. We do our vetting. I mean, it's always 2 of us talking to a player. When we Pittsburgh,
we have 4.
It's 2, but well, it's a minimum of 2. Usually, now it's with coach on the team. We have somebody understands builds, has another perspective from a different place. We can all there's 3 or 4 of us when we talk to people. And here's what our plan is, here's how we do things. But the question kind of comes down, is there anybody you gambled on and it like was, wow, it was better than we expected, or wow, we'll never do that again?
In terms of drafting, there's no one that we've drafted and it turned out to be a mistake. We had one player who only played with us a season, and real life got into with him. He was right around COVID time, and he lost his job, and so he couldn't return.
Right.
But in terms of personality, everyone we've drafted has been a home run. I look at my first draft. We brought in Alex Constantine. He's been with us since season 14, not going anywhere. One of the things I look at when we're drafting people, and I'm kind of letting the hat out of the bag a little bit, but I look for people who are unselfish. And when we were interviewing Alex, I remember one of the things he told us, I don't care about my stats. I want us to be successful as a team. There was a person who I brought in free agency. I'm not going to say names, but when I brought him in, he goes, Ed. Matter of fact, I say his name, Max Knight. When I brought him in, he said, Eddie, I could care less about my stats. What I want is for my running back to get in the Hall of, for my middle linebacker to get in the Hall of Fame. Because if he's in the Hall of Fame, that means I'm drawing a double team, and it's freeing him up to go make tackles. And when he said that, he moved right up my draft board. I said, we got to draft that guy. I don't care what we got to do to get him, but that's our guy. I believe that was that Max Knight? I believe it was. I might be wrong on that, but when he said that, I said, that's our guy. I don't care who all has more value than him. That's our guy. We making him a first-round draft pick because that's my guy. And I will never forget when he said that. Alex Constantine, same thing. He didn't care about how many sacks he got. He wanted to be known as a run stuffer. What?
Okay.
How many defensive linemen saying that's our guy.
Right.
I drafted him in the second round in season 14 when we had the draft out in Boston. He's been with us ever since. And at one point, he even moved to defensive end because it was free agency time and we were having a hard time getting defensive end. And I asked him about moving to defensive end because we had a defensive tackle who turned out to be Hunter Norwood who wanted to play with us. And so he moved to defensive end in order for us to bring Hunter in. So I look for people who have that team first mentality anytime we interview them. And when they say stuff like that, I write their name down in pen and I make sure if we got to trade up, I don't care what we got to do to get them. That's the guy I want. So that's always been my mindset.
Okay. Very similar to us. And I appreciate that type of mindset. I mean, it's not really letting it out of the bag because anybody knows the Arizona organization, they understand it's team first.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
part of why when we looked, there are certain teams you watched very closely. But with that, you mentioned the draft. This is the final draft. From what I understand, you don't have picks this year, do you?
We have two.
them. I thought you sold them. See,
not officially.
I got my fingers in a lot of places. I'm going to catch you.
That could be a little bird in the tree told me that might be happening. I guess we have to wait and see.
Yeah, but I understand why you would do it because if your team's set the way you want, it's hard to bring in people, especially if you're not sure if they're going to be around. Because
18 is a long way down.
This has changed a lot because there's no draft following next year. It's more of an NCAA, recruiting, transfer portal, whatever you want to call it, which should be interesting as owners and GMs and coaches how we approach this, and not so much the 1 year rental approach that you see a lot. I wonder if that's kind of it. So how are you kind of approaching this? I mean, you're going to have to be competing against people like me, like the guys at Minnesota, Canton, Sin City, who's going to be your rival every time now. These more established
Have you seen Sin
things.
City's roster? Man, they are deep, bro. That defense, my goodness.
Oh, I've done a lot of looking at a lot of rosters this offseason.
Yeah.
So I guess what's kind of your approach for this? I mean, we are changing from, we had the free agency in a draft, and now it's like just a massive free agency. So, I mean, what's kind of the approach mentally that you're taking as a seasoned veteran? I mean, obviously, I don't want you spilling trade secrets, and at least not on camera, at least not while we're recording. But the idea is, you're competing against other people now for literally everything versus where beforehand is like, okay, I had to draft, I can maneuver around, to now everybody's a free agent all the time.
Well, for me, I think it's going to force teams. It's going to force more teams to actually watch more SFLM games.
Right.
For example, when I watch games in the minors, I don't watch to see who's playing well. I could care less. I don't care if the guy finished with 0 sacks, 2 tackles all season versus the guy who has 9 sacks and 17 tackles for loss or whatever. I'm looking at what they type in Gen Chat and what they type in the game chat. I'll give you an example. Will Todd, I fell in love with that guy almost immediately. Season 16, he went to Atlanta, but I've always loved that dude. When you watch him in game chats, he congratulates his teammates when they make a play. Of course, he's happy when he makes a play, but he also congratulated the other team when they were playing against him. Oh, wow, that was a great play, guys. He was always upbeat, always positive, whether his team was winning or losing. And I remember when, back in the day, the SFL used to have a bunch of guys who made all these mock drafts. And for whatever reason, Will Todd was on hardly any of them. And I remember back then I was doing Say It With Your Chest, and I was asking, why the hell aren't people talking about Will Todd? Why is he not in these mock drafts? I couldn't understand this. And it used to, I won't say piss me off, but I was perplexed as to why people weren't talking about him. But back then, people they looking at stats and all that stuff. You can always mold a player into what you want him to be. But
Right.
their attitude and their mindset and their mannerisms, that's something that's hard to change and or hard to mold. They either have it or they don't. And some who don't, you can kind of influence them to be better or to mold them to the way you want them to be, but it's very hard. And so I never look at stats. I look at what you guys are saying, you know.
Mhm.
And Will Todd, we already had a tight end, so we didn't draft him. But that was back before the league roster started growing and having two tight ends became more
Right.
of an advantage to have. And so he went to Atlanta. But I always told myself if our position at tight end ever opened up, I was first person I was reaching out to was Will Todd.
Right.
And he ended up being a backup. He played as a tight end too in Atlanta. And back then we had TJ Punk who was a tight end, but he ended up moving to wide receiver. And when
Right.
he did, the timing was just perfect. And so we reached out, hey, yo, Todd, man, what's up, man? No, I'm sorry, I take that back. He declared free agency, and we reached out to him. Hey, man, I heard you're a free agent, man. Come on to Arizona. He goes, I'd love to be there. And he's
Right.
been our tight end one ever since, and I absolutely love that guy. He's the same way today as he was back then. Nothing has changed about him. Love him.
Yeah. He's
As
one
long
I
as I'm
always
here,
looked
he's
at
here.
too. I like his build. I just like the way he's built, and I watch your games. Like I'm like you. I read the game chat.
Mm-hmm.
No, I want to see who's talking.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what they're saying and how, and not so much what they're saying, but how they're portraying it, because that means a lot. And I always like Todd. I mean, obviously Lauren Prococo is an amazing, all-star, all-pro, Hall of Fame tight end. But I
Yeah.
mean, there's other people that you can build towards as well. So, is there any owner in this league that you've learned probably a ton from? Just you never worked with, but you always learn something from them.
Another easy answer. Owner of the Atlanta Swarm, Mark Chisholm.
Fair.
I guess really three owners, really, but I took the most from him. I'll also throw in Damon because, I was working up under him. He taught me a lot. When I wanted to become an owner, he blessed me right away, and he gave me co-ownership so I could learn what it was like, what the roles were and the responsibilities were of being an owner and how we're held accountable. So I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot about coaching from Mighty RX. He still teaches me today.
Right.
But in terms of everything else, in terms of leadership responsibilities and what it's like to be an owner, a father figure for a lot of these people, Mark Chisholm, without a doubt. He's taught me so much about compassion towards your players, responsibility, the crown that we wear and how to wear it, how to go about approaching your locker room, addressing them. Like I said, I read a lot of books on leadership,
Right.
but he taught me a ton, and I'll be forever grateful.
That's good. So is there I guess with that, is there any ownership, any owner front office that you kind of see as like a friendly rival to you? I mean, it's like you see them as like equal, but like I want to beat them, but we do it in a fun way versus an adversarial way. Because I mean, a lot of people go, "Oh, I don't like so and so, I don't like this, or don't like that," versus like, "Hey, I respect them enough that we can have this," but at the same time, it's like I want to beat them.
Yes, there are some teams who, when we win, I naturally take more joy out of it because I respect the hell out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Back when Jeremy was coaching,
Right.
I took pride in going up against them. Baltimore, always. Florida, of course. Atlanta back in their day, of course. I don't want to leave out anybody. But there are a number of teams who, when you find a way to get that W, it's special
Right.
for
Well,
sure.
it's because you said you respect them so much.
Yeah.
And that's in any realm that's important. As we go, and for those who don't know, I look off the side because I have another screen with all my questions on it. So if you see anything like this, it's because I'm trying to deal with, chat GPT and how that is sometimes. So we talked a little bit about, so I guess we kind of touched on this earlier when you talked about the people losing something, but how do you kind of, as an owner, how do you deal with these ups and downs that you see through a season? I mean, you can, I mean, last year you were 7-0.
Yeah.
And then you had your loss. And then you go back, and just like a little blip, or was it like, and then have to, the standard Arizona potholes where you just hit them out in the middle of nowhere?
True story. So, first of all, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm a very emotional person. And especially the fact that I'm coaching the team, all the work that's put in prior to the game. Most of the guys on the team, they're here on game day. Game day, they show up, watch the game, and then they can turn off the SFL until the next game day.
Right.
It's not even a thing for them. For coaches, it's part of our life. You spend so much time doing this, so much time away from your wife and kids. It's crazy how much time is necessary to prepare for a game.
Right.
And there's little relief. I mean, now we have these bye weeks, thank God. But there's little relief yet and still. And
Right.
you do all this work, you prepare, you turn in that playbook on Friday night, and once I submit it, I'm on pins and needles, and I'm like, hasten, man, should I have done this? Should I have took that play out the playbook? Should I have added this? I'm a wreck. And then come game day, I don't care what time I went to sleep. For whatever reason, my biological clock wakes me up around 4:30, and I have to do something to stay busy because all I can think about is, oh my God, I hope I don't embarrass this team. I hope this all works out. And I'm just a mess. And what's worse is my family knows it. They tell me, oh, today must be game day. And I'm like, it.
Yeah.
And whether our game is on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, they know when game day is because I'm just going through it. And I don't care if we playing the defending champs or some high school team. I'm just a wreck, and I don't settle down until the game starts. And even then, this doggone high heart rate alert on my watch goes off at least 3 times. If it doesn't go off at least 3 times, something is wrong. Because I don't care if we up 20, this thing goes off. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's just nonstop, and it's crazy how much this has impacted my life. You know what I mean? And I'm so driven to win that freaking championship. Is crazy. I have dreams about it. I daydream about it. I fantasize reading that final score. It's just so much a part of me. I remember watching Baltimore playing a championship game several seasons ago, and they were reading off, all the players had their chance to say, I don't know, Jack Whitmore, quarterback, and wherever cities he's from. You know what I mean? And so I remember telling myself, one day that's going to be us.
Right.
And I want my guys and guys on the team to experience that. And we got a chance to do it twice, thank God. But I envision, it's like nonstop. I think I've taken years off my life stressing about it because one day the Arizona Scorpions are going to be world champions, and I'm not going to stop until I get it. I've been close, but to me, that's what drives me, man. It's like, I don't know, man. I want it so bad, man. I want it too bad. And so the week for me is insane because there's no left. There's no time to relax. As soon as you submit that book, it's time to start preparing for the next one. And there's like no time to just and just exhale into the off season. So it's just a driving force for me, man. And I remember when we win, the whole team is happy.
Right.
You know what I mean? But when we lose, especially when you're in that VC, I remember we were playing were they Lone Star back then? Or I forget. Maybe they were ACA. I can't remember. I
That
think
was
they were
before
ACA.
me, so
I think they were ACA. And we lost a heartbreak. We were winning the entire game, and they scored the winning touchdown with like 8 seconds left. And the locker room was hype all game. And some people are ahead of others because depending on your internet speed and all that.
right.
And they scored that touchdown, and we were hype all game. And when they scored that touchdown with like 8 seconds left, that VC was so quiet.
Oh,
I
God.
mean, it was like a funeral in there. And I'm just so down. And I'm thinking about what I could have did different, what happened, what went wrong. And just to go through those highs and lows, man, it wears on coaches because we wear that. And now we got to walk in the locker room and talk to the players and, hey, guys, we'll get them next time. The best team won or whatever. And it's just brutal, man. I don't think people realize how much stress coaches go through.
Yeah, I
Or at least
understand.
some of us.
I understand. Well, I mean, it sounds like you put a lot of passion in, and that's what I guess really makes the good teams the good teams. I mean, obviously, people pay money to be owners. You pay more than the average person.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going into it, and there's a lot of teams that have some great marketing, some great stuff, but it seems like the best teams have a culture and a drive that's just different than everybody else. And that's just from my short time here, the 3 seasons I played. It's like, it seems like there's a driving force behind it. Is that a fair assumption with you guys? That there's this?
Without a doubt, man, dude, I am destined. It's my goal. I will not stop until we win at least one. And after we win that one, I'm going to exhale, but I'm already going to be thinking about getting that second one. You know what I mean? Dude, I don't want to just win one. I want to win multiple.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm not stopping until I get it. I'm just not. It drives me. I want to be able to go to my store and buy a hat that says Season 24 SFL Champions. You know what I mean? And I'm not stopping until we get it. I want it so bad. I've been close. I lost in freaking overtime to Baltimore in their house. That was painful. I still have that loss will hurt me forever.
Well, being that you started at Baltimore, a different franchise, but still that same city, so there's a connection there too. It's personal.
Yeah,
right.
It's all they all personal. Everybody in my locker room tell you it's Arizona versus everybody else. I don't speak to ops on the week we play. I remember when Yayo, my GM now, he was coaching ACA back then. And for whatever reason, he would try to get in the opposing coaches every week. He would be DMing them he was DMing me every day. 7 days, man. How that playbook looking? 6 days. We blowing y'all out in these sims. 5 days, bro. I hope you get it together. You know, I don't respond. The week we play teams, I don't talk to you. Don't talk to me. I'm not your friend this week, bro. We can say good game after that, but from the minute that last whistle from the previous game ends until this one ends, bro, I don't know you. Lose my number. It's Arizona versus everybody else, you know? And that's the mindset I'm always gonna have.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said on your show, it's hogs versus them, and that's a mentality of I don't care who it is.
Yeah,
it's us. We got to work on us. It's our process, and that's something we work very hard on. With that kind of mentality, is there like any coach or person you kind of like look as that model for what you do? See, I grew up under Rich Brooks and Mike Bellotti, knowing Mike Bellotti and Jeff Tedford personally, and Chris Peterson, and then Josh Wilcox was one of my former players at Junction City. He's now the head coach at Cal. So I mean, I have kind of connections. There's certain types of way we approach things. Is there a certain? And then now we have Dan Lanning, who like is a whole different level of intensity. Is there anybody you kind of go like, yeah, that's who I I like what they do. I mean, I can be them, but I want to be more like that.
I like Mike Tomlin.
Love Mike Tomlin.
I respect the hell out that guy. He's I don't know him, of course, but from what I see, he seems to be like a no nonsense kind of guy. You know, you've heard it probably many times. The standard is the standard.
Mm-hmm.
I love his approach. He's direct. He's straight to the point, and I like when he has talent. I like how he uses it. Big fan of Mike Tomlin.
Yeah, I like Mike Tomlin from a coaching perspective. Like you say, he's direct, but he's also a teacher at all times. But probably my favorite clip is I don't remember who they were playing, but they're playing away. They're losing, and here's an all-pro offensive lineman. He's like, dude, what are you doing? We're still playing the game. Get your butt down. I mean, he's literally on the sideline correcting an all-pro. The guy is making a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
You guys like, you got it, coach. My mistake. And he's always teaching, but he's doing it in a direct but kind way.
I remember a clip. I forget who the player was, but they're losing and they're driving downfield trying to win the game. And it's clearly they're going to be their last shot at winning. And he had a player draw a penalty that happened after the whistle for unsportsmanlike conduct or whatever it was. And
Right.
he put him to the side and says, hey, man, what's going on? He goes, well, the guy, said something to me. I forgot what the guy said. He said something to him, pushed him or whatever it was.
Right.
And he told him, hey, man, what's bigger, that moment or the team? And the guy wasn't trying to hear it. And he brought him back to him. Hey, I'm not done talking to you. What's more important, that moment or the team? And the guy says the team. He says, never forget that, and pushed him back out there. So
I love that about coaches that can do that.
Yeah.
Tomlin's one of those. Bill Walsh was one that always used to be able to do that because I'm dating myself a little bit. I'm Gen X. I watched them growing up. Mike Holmgren, when he was at Seattle, was the same way. And then obviously Saban, yeah, he's tough, but he's like, hey, dude, he'll still teach. Kirby Smart, I don't know as much, but just kind of the approach. When we're kind of looking at the different things here, and we're going to kind of shift a little bit away from football for just a moment. You get a podcast of your own, don't you?
Yeah.
What brought you into podcasting?
He was kind of
you're at what, episode 71 next week time or 72 or whatever?
Something like that. I also got 82 episodes of Say It With Your Chest too. So it's been a minute.
Yeah. So kind of bring us into the idea of podcasting, and then we'll get into your Say It With Your Chest, how that came about too.
Well, Say It With Your Chest came first, but back at that time, the league had a show that was ran once a week. And I can't remember the name of it, but there was a bunch of people involved. It was myself, it was Chad, Cam, I want to say like maybe 4 or 5 other members of the community. And then a guy who's not here right now. He was pretty much running the whole thing. He did all the edits and stuff.
Right.
But the show took a long time because there was a lot of editing involved and a lot of different segments. And it wasn't a typical show. It was a great show, but it took a lot to put it all together behind the scenes that people don't see. And it was so taxing that it didn't last long because it just took a lot of work. Because there was a lot of editing involved, like I said, and it was stressful and time consuming. And I remember once Chad and I did a segment together. Yeah, just laughing thinking about it now. But Chad and I did a segment together, and that ended up getting cut out of the show.
Okay.
And so we never saw it, which happens because stuff runs long. They can't put it all together. I get that. But then the guy who makes all the edits, I can't remember his name right now for some reason, but he came to Chad and told him, hey, listen, I need you and Eddie to change your approach when you're doing this. And instead of doing it this way, we need you to do it this way. He never told me that, but he told Chad. and it pissed Chad off.
Right.
And so Chad came to me and told me what he said, and I said, wait a minute, what? And so we don't know if that's why it was edited out or if they just didn't have time or what the case may be. I don't know. But that pissed Chad off. And when he told me, it kind of pissed me off. And then Chad said, well, dude, one day we're just going to do our own show. And I said, you know what? You're right. And that way we can have more control, we have more freedom, and we can do things our way. But it didn't happen for a long time. And actually, before that happened, myself, Mark, and Shane was supposed to do a podcast together. It's going to be called The Owner's Box.
Right.
And we were going to talk about all things SFL, but it never kicked off because we could never all get together at the same time. That worked for us because, Shane was working a lot of hours back then, and we could just never all get together and sit down and do it. And so the show just never took off. I think we had one episode, but it was me and someone else. It wasn't even Mark. It was,
Right.
And it literally lasted one episode and it died right there. And so, that kind of, sparked my interest still. And I wanted to do something, but I said, you know what? If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it by myself. So I don't have to worry about other people's schedules and all that. I can just do me. The only thing I had to worry about, because back then I was brand new. I didn't know anything about OBS or how all that stuff
Right.
worked. And so I had Swole and Harish helping me do all that stuff in the background. They ran all that stuff. I just showed up and spoke. And that first show, we had 82 people at one point watching live, which is a lot
Oh, wow.
for SFL podcast. And so I said, whoa, this thing can go somewhere. And it lasted for about maybe I want to say like 2 seasons, maybe 3, I can't remember. But then, me and Chad kind of brought up the idea we spoke about doing the show. And so I was going to do that, and I was going to do Streets of Talking and Say It With Your Chest, but that was just a lot of work. And so I said, I'm going to either do one or the other. And I said, well, I'll just do Streets of Talking during the season and maybe Say It With Your Chest in the off season who have things they want to say, but in the off season. But it turned out I just kept continuing to do Say It With Your Chest, and that's kind of went off. And to me, I love doing it because it's my way to get away from running Sims and force me to do something else, because I go crazy if I just run Sims all day.
Right.
But like you said, we just did our 70th or 71st episode of whatever heck it was, and I love it. But since then, Chad had to step down because real life kind of gotten away from him. So now it's me and Brett, and Chad comes back every now and again. But for the most part, it's me and Brett running it now.
That's good. That's interesting. Well, we got 2 questions left.
All right.
You're like me, look at the clock, because I know you got a time commitment too. It's like,
Well, I'm good.
yeah, so here's one that's kind of a little bit, we've kind of touched on it, and this is from my other sim FBA, and this is from one of our coaches there, and he goes, what sort of aspects of your personal life, temperament, approach to things, do you bring into any simulation game or any game, not specifically SFL or SFL, but how do you bring your personality into your coaching and ownership style?
I've always been a fan of NFL teams who've had a strong defense and a solid running game. Always been a fan of that, which is why I've always been a fan of the Bears back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a fan of the Steelers, how they ran things back in the day. I've always been a fan of the 49ers some seasons ago when they were known for their solid running. I've always loved teams who can go out there, kick you in the mouth, get you off the field in 3 downs, and go out there and just run the ball down your throat, and there's nothing you can do about it when you know it's coming. The Bucks, when they had Mike Allstott, love those guys, man. That's another one.
Yeah,
but
Chiefs with Okoye.
Yeah. Oh man, dude, come on, yeah, man, you talking now? But
I'm saying Nigerian Nightmare was.
Oh yeah, I was
a
big fan,
huge fan of that approach.
But I've always loved that mindset, because to me, if you can play defense and run the ball, that means there's less opportunities for the team for for your team to have turnovers. And I've always loved that. That season where DJ Moses was the MVP, season 20.
Yeah.
Ooh, man, that was fun to watch because I didn't have to worry about, all the interceptions. I can just hand the ball to DJ, get behind the red sea, go pick up 5 yards, get up, let's go do it again. Man, I loved it. So I've always had that mindset and I like it. But at the same time, with these expanded rosters, I'm learning to become to tolerate us throwing the ball because you have to, because you want those receivers to come back.
Right,
you know what I
right.
mean?
You want the retention, yeah.
So you got to find ways to feed them and keep them happy. And I think one of my more satisfying moments was, or seasons was last season. We didn't win it, and we made it to the Elite Eight, I guess you could call it. But our offense was ranked 4th in scoring. And although our running game wasn't elite as previous seasons, our quarterback was efficient. Ashley was second in the SFL in completion percentage. And I took pride in that because first was Florida's Ron Cochran, but his running back led the team in receptions. So a lot of those passes going, out there to the flat, well, of course, you expect it to be completed. Ashley was throwing that thing downfield, and we was completing it. So, it's little stuff like that that many people may not talk about, but I really appreciate.
Well, knowing the nuances of the game helps. I mean, I spent 25 years as an offensive coordinator, but I understand defense because you have to.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you're a defensive coordinator, you know the offense. So this is a kind of unofficial question and just kind of popped back in my head before I do the last question that was left from last time. Who kind of surprised you this last year, from last year to the start of season 24? Anybody? I mean, because we have drafts, we have free agency, we have minor leagues, we have all this stuff going on. Anybody just like, wow, they did that, or wow, they did that type thing?
2 teams, Atlanta and Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
Because Albuquerque was formed last season. This was their first season. And Atlanta lost a lot of players to Albuquerque. And so it's basically one franchise being split. And so no one, and I mean no one, expected them to have the success that they did. Both teams ended up making the playoffs. Both teams had great quarterback play. At one point, Dynasty was my MVP.
Mm-hmm.
But then, sure enough, Cyrus Jive, he came in and took his spot, at least for me, for MVP.
Right.
If I had a vote and it had been me, Cyrus Jive would have been my MVP because he had a great season. Neither team had as much talent as others. In fact, I don't think either team started the season with the maximum $42 million payroll. I think they both fell a few million short. And for them to be able to not only compete but win games, Atlanta made the playoffs in the toughest division in the SFL.
Mm-hmm.
Albuquerque, they beat out Vancouver in terms of wins, who make the playoffs every season. In fact, when they played Vancouver, I think they gave them their worst loss last season. So both those teams surprised me. Not only did they play well, but they made the playoffs. Both quarterbacks played well, and they both did it with less talent than most teams in the SFL has. So I think they deserve their flowers for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Having seen Albuquerque in the minor leagues coming through and knowing their pedigree and seeing Atlanta and knowing that it was a split was kind of impressive to me as well. And I'm still fairly new, so I don't know the old history of some of these teams. I just know what I've seen. Right. So we have a tradition on this show, as you've probably seen. The last guest leaves a question for the next guest, not knowing who it is. And this is actually a 2-part one. So it's going to be the same question, but it's going to be flipped to different sides of the coin. Okay. So the question is, and understand, this isn't just sim. This can be real life too. Okay. So I'll give you a second to think on this one because this is a good question. Wasn't for me this time. Okay. So what is a mistake you've made in life that you would want to go back and do differently? The second half of the question is, what is a mistake in your life are you glad that had happened?
The first one is a two-parter.
So this is the two parts of it. The first one is, what
my
mistake
answer is
have you made in life that you would want to go back and do differently? The second part is, what is the mistake in life that you're glad has happened?
okay. The first question, I have two answers.
Okay.
One, I wish I'd went to college sooner. For sure. I started taking college courses when I was 22. 22? Maybe 23, one or two. But I went to the Army for 4 years.
Right.
I love the experience. Got to go overseas. But I wish I'd have started taking college courses while I was in there. I wish I would have met my wife sooner.
Right.
Love that woman. Once we had more years together, because we would have got a lot more accomplished. And what's the second half of that question?
The second half of the question is, what is a mistake in life that you're glad happened? Like a fortunate mistake, basically.
Oh. Not sharing the whole story. I wish Antoine hadn't passed away.
Right.
But changed my life for the better.
So finding positive out of something
he sacrificed himself for me in a situation in which we both should have been dead. And he literally jumped in the line of fire to give me time to get up out of there. Had he not done that, we both probably would be gone. But he made me promise I was going to change my ways and get up out of that situation so that I could have a chance to live life. Learn some every day. Yeah.
I understand that feeling. Eddie, thank you for taking time out of your day and sharing your life with us. People get to see a little bit different version of you in my podcast than what they get to see. I mean, obviously the locker room at Arizona has got a great leader, which helps. And they get to see this part of you. The rest of the league doesn't. Is there anything that we missed that you'd like to just discuss or bring up?
It's different being on this side of the camera.
Well, you're always on camera.
I'm always on camera. It's different taking the questions rather than giving them. So it's kind of new for me. But no, just I'm starting to get that itch again because the season's around the corner. You know, I've done a lot of decompressing. But that said, you never truly decompress because as a coach, you're always looking for ways to improve your team, and the league keep changing these rules, the playbooks and everything else. So you think you're going to get some time off and you find yourself playing with it. But the time is coming upon us, and you know, my family, my wife and I, we going on a cruise soon, actually during Christmas.
Okay.
And so I'm looking forward to spending time with them. And before we get back at it, and it's going to be the calm before the storm, so to speak. And
right,
we got to a lot of opponents. Got a great schedule and some teams ready to take our head off, and including you guys.
Hey, all I know is living in Arizona, you grab a scorpion by the tail, never from the front. I
That's
know
right.
that. So and trust me, it's not going to come from the front. And trust me, we saw this, and I get this message from Corey. Week 3, huh? Yeah.
Why week 3? What happens who you guys got week 1 and 2?
One we got DC. 2 is Bossier City, but week 3, because we thought we had our game plan dialed in, and then all of a sudden you guys just freaking just lit us up after the second quarter. Like, oh, because that's our measuring stick is you guys. It's like, okay, so we're always going to pay attention to Arizona.
So teams who've won it, like Florida and Baltimore, they not the measuring stick?
Oh, Baltimore's the measuring stick too, just because we almost beat them last year and they're week 4. But we got to get through you and DC and Bossier City before we get to them. And then me personally, because my first team was Denver. Denver's week 5. And it's like,
oh wow.
And then my first SFL team was Lexington. That's week 6. So it's like, okay, I always talk with Marco. And it's like, okay, we got a tough one to start off with. I'm like, you know what? We got to show up against Arizona. We got to show up against Baltimore. It's just certain people. But it's like, we got a good schedule. I like it. It's not going to be easy, but you know what? It's going to be worth it when something good comes out of it, though. That's how we look at it.
For sure.
Yeah. Right. For everybody watching, where can we find your podcast? Because remember, this goes out to multiple leagues. So
it's here. Let me pull it up because I don't remember it by heart. I never do. I don't know why.
Well, it's called The Streets Are Talking, right?
The podcast is called The Streets Are Talking. You can find it on Twitch, and my Twitch channel is twitch.tv/Eddie Gauge, Gauge.
Okay. So we can find you there, and hopefully as this goes out to the other league, more people will start making the crossovers back and forth between the two, especially with your quarterback. That's my rival in the other league.
Yeah.
In like every sport.
I love that dude. EG.
He's great. I mean, he and I've talked all the time and do this, but for those that do it, you can also find me on simulationfootball.net or at simulationfl.net, ufl.football, and then I'm a big part of the simfba.com, which is a Simulation Football Association, which is free to play as well. So come out and join us. I don't do the algorithm things. I don't care if you hit, like, subscribe, whatever. I'm not too worried about it. I'm just producing good content with good people. But for those watching, thank you once again for watching the Wheels Off podcast and behind the clipboard this time with Mr. Eddie Gauge. Thank you, Eddie.
Arizona, I love y'all. Let's go get this season 24 championship, man. We out of here.